It may begin with you forgetting the name of a longtime friend, or suddenly you don't know where you are on a route that you've taken for years. Maybe you've noticed a major personality change in your spouse or parent. Any of these scenarios may have you asking, could it be dementia or Alzheimer's? More than 20,000 people in our province are currently living with dementia, and that number is expected to double in the next 10 years. Today on Blue Sky, we're going to hear from a couple who are navigating the young onset of Alzheimer's disease together. We'll also find out what kind of support the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan is able to offer families. And we'll hear from a Regina woman about what she learned about navigating dementia with her mom. And of course, we want to hear from you. If you have experienced navigating Alzheimer's with a family member, we'd like to hear from you. What is something you wish you'd learned earlier? Call 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Kelly Jo Burke and Eric Eggertson always knew there was a chance that dementia might be in their future, but it did not prepare the Regina couple for what did come, navigating Eric's young onset Alzheimer's together. A case is considered young onset if it's diagnosed before the age of 65. The couple say the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan has given them support that they needed to get through their journey, and they shared some of their story with the Morning Edition host, Adam Hunter.
Eric, let's start with you. Why did you know that dementia might be in your future?
Well, my father had a form of dementia, so it was very high on our radar.
His dad's dementia was one of the very rare kinds of dementia that is actually hereditary. It's frontotemporal dementia, and we were part of a study for 20 years trying to track whether or not Eric would carry the same gene as his father, because it was that particular form of dementia is incredibly cruel and generally comes with ALS as well.
And so we basically were involved in this study, and they kept working with us, and I kept going for tests and things like that just to create a baseline of my cognitive ability. And then they found they had real slow progress on finding genetic markers for frontotemporal dementia. So suddenly they had a breakthrough, and they basically could identify almost all of them. But the one my dad had wasn't one that was included in the group. So we just were sort of waiting to see if that would happen. And then finally they did identify the DNA and that was responsible. And then they did a test of my genetics and found that I wasn't a match. So I'd won the 50-50 choice on that, and didn't have the kind of dementia Dad had.
And we had a party and we danced and it was wonderful. And then Eric looked up and said, yeah, but something is still wrong.
And Eric, what was wrong?
Well, I just, I've always been a little impulsive and fidgety, but I was just finding that I was having trouble staying on tasks and keeping my, I worked in communications for years. And one of the things I did was writing up news releases and announcements and speeches and that sort of thing. After a while, it just becomes second nature to you, and you sort of build it in your head and then just sort of knock it out in one go. And I just found that I was taking much longer to get things done and making more mistakes. And I just knew there was something wasn't working right, despite the fact that I didn't inherit my dad's condition.
And Kelly Jo, did you notice anything?
Yeah. I mean, there was so much going on. We had gotten this information from the study we participated in that he should get tested because his dad did have the gene for this dreadful form of frontotemporal dementia. And so that was going on, and it was 2020 and there was something else going on. Yeah. So we were dealing with the pandemic, and Eric worked for health. So it was all hands on deck at health. And it was very clear to me that he was not retaining things. If I was sitting in a car and I asked him to go into the store and pick up 3 things, I would have to send him a message on his phone. He could remember 2 maybe, but he could not remember 3. And that was, 5 years ago. So it was clear to me that his cognition was not where it was. And Eric is an incredibly intelligent person. And so it was quite noticeable.
When it comes to how you've dealt with this, and when you, I guess, found out that there was something, what was the process to get a diagnosis, Eric?
Well, a friend of ours had her partner had been hit he was in a car accident, and his brain got a little scrambled, and she had him go through a series of assessments for memory problems and that sort of thing. And we were talking to her, and she said, you should go do this. So we coughed up the money to get a private assessment done, and
a neuropsychological assessment, which is a sort of 2-day process, which looks at various aspects of memory, executive function, and the ability to persevere at tasks.
They got us back for a recap of what their findings were, and it said that it looked like I had Alzheimer's.
But that was how we got Eric out of work, because he clearly couldn't work anymore. And that was how we got him on disability. And that was how we moved to a full diagnosis.
And when you go through that process, what was that like, Kelly Jo?
A lot of paperwork, like 60 pages of paperwork. Like, it was my full-time job for 3 months to get Eric testing, referrals, fill out documents, deal with long-term disability, deal with various health insurances. It was. I became essentially his executive assistant, and that was doubled up by the fact that his executive function was one of the first things to go. So he was no longer able to participate in bill paying, monitoring bills, monitoring appointments. I basically took over the executive function for the family. So it was a fun time.
Eric.
And if I hadn't had Kelly to lean on for that, I don't know when I would have been able to get a proper diagnosis.
Eric, what's it been like since that moment navigating this?
Well, in a way, it's sort of reassuring, because there's people who understand what we're going through and have advice about things, and I'm part of a group of people with Alzheimer's, the early onset side of Alzheimer's, and it's good to be able to chat with people who are experiencing some of the same issues that you are, and that's with the Alzheimer's Society. But it's just a long haul, and sometimes it all makes sense to me, and other times I sort of get lost in the weeds of some of the details, rather than sort of able to look at the big picture and sort out what the next obvious thing to do is.
And Kelly Jo, how have you been dealing with this?
Day by day, really day by day. There are days that are kind of dreadful, because Alzheimer's doesn't go in a straight line. It goes with, it's like skiing moguls. You're up and you're down, and you're up and down. And there are days where Eric will ask me the same thing 12 times. He will misplace everything. He won't know what day it is. And that of course, increases his anxiety, which increases his inability to remember things, and it just spirals. And those are not great days. Other days, we're just us. Other days, we're just hanging out, doing our thing, and very much the couple we've always been. And that gives you a little bit of whiplash sometimes. But you have to just really be grateful for those good days. And I certainly am. I'm incredibly grateful. And I understand. And anybody who's going through this and they're further down the journey than we are is sitting going, she's got no idea what's coming. And I actually, that's true. I don't. These are the good days. We're having the good days right now because we are still ourselves and we can still be ourselves. Most of the time. And so that makes me super conscious of appreciating that.
For you both, how has the Alzheimer Society helped you in this journey?
Well, I mean, they've got lots of things online where you can sort of dig deep on a topic or watch some videos that have a group talking about an issue or somebody providing advice on something, but also the
support group.
This, like, basically we get together once a month and just have a chat session with other people who are dealing with Alzheimer's, and it just is reassuring to hear other people dealing with stuff, and some of the things they deal with, they're very frustrated by it. Others, they're just well, what are you going to do? And it helps give you a sense of perspective of maybe what's coming your way if you're seeing someone in the group who's becoming more withdrawn and less communicative. But just, being able to laugh about some things that happen to people and share your own version of events, just in a way, it just makes you feel like you're not going down that road alone, and that other people are sharing that experience, and it's not all movie of the week drama. Sometimes it's just silly things that happen.
And I know as we go further down the road that when I have to consult about, finding extended care or other things like that, the Alzheimer's Society has a lot of information to share. And so that will be where I go first when I'm trying to figure out what next steps are.
That was Regina couple Kelly Jo Burke and Eric Egerton speaking with the Morning Edition's host, Adam Hunter. Their story was recently featured by the Saskatchewan Alzheimer's Society. They say they shared their story to show others hope is possible with the right information and support. We have two guests in our Regina studio who've been listening in. Heather Dash is the program manager for the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan. Welcome to Blue Sky.
I'm happy to be here.
And my other guest, a longtime producer here at CBC Saskatchewan before she retired. Happy to have you back in the building. Sharon Grine helped her mom, though, navigate Alzheimer's, and she's here to share what that was like as your own experience and what she learned along the way. We're grateful to Kelly Jo and Eric and Sharon for sharing their experiences today. And we know there are a lot of you out there whose lives have been touched by this. If you want to share some of what you've learned on your own journey or as a caregiver, you can call 1-800-716-2221 or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. If you have questions for the Alzheimer's Society as well, you can send those in as well. Both of you listening in to that interview that Adam did with Eric and Kelly Jo, you may listen to that a little differently than our listeners. What stood out to you, Sharon?
A lot of familiarity for me,
Brings a lot of memories.
Yeah. Like a lot of being grateful, and at times, and sorry, I'm getting
It's okay, it's your mom.
I'm getting weepy already. Yeah. I have a saying I've stole from The Simpsons that I cry when I do long division and there's a remainder, so don't expect don't expect me to get through this today without some tears. I just didn't think it would happen in the first couple of minutes. But just that being grateful, and I'm glad for them they realize that they should be grateful, because sometimes you're so frustrated in the beginning that you don't realize that those actually were the good days.
Mm-hmm. Heather, what did you hear in that interview?
Well, the uniqueness with that interview is Eric with his young onset. That's kind of a topic that, like, when people think of dementia, they think of people in their 80s, or in long-term care and things like that. But the idea of that somebody can develop dementia so young. And honestly, you can develop dementia as young as 18 up to, under 65. Mm-hmm. But generally, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and there is extra challenges when you develop young onset, because most of the time you're still working. Your partner is still working. Your children may still be in school.
May still need you.
Yes. And so, there's a lot extra hurdles, talking about the 60-page, stuff that they have to go through, because there is extra things that they have to navigate. They have to navigate disability and everything like that. So it's just, and like I said, when people think of dementia, they think of people in their 80s. They're not thinking of people in their homes that still, had a lot of things that they wanted to do in the community and everything like that before the dementia touched them. Mm-hmm. So, the services, are a bit more challenging because they are focused more for the older generation.
Heather, can we get a definition clarification before we get started? What is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? Because I think people use them interchangeably.
Yes. Well, so Alzheimer's disease is an actual disease. Now, dementia is actually an umbrella term. So what that means is that it describes symptoms. So it describes having memory issues, and all those things that you think of, somebody with Alzheimer's. But there's actually over 80 different types of dementias out there.
Really?
So it is difficult when you're first noticing there is signs. So a lot of times they will say dementia, because sort of how I sort of view getting a diagnosis is it's a puzzle. There's not one test that will say you have dementia and this is the specific type that you have. Mm-hmm. It is getting all the pieces together, and sometimes it's a lot more difficult and you have to get a lot more tests done. And it takes time, and it takes seeing specialists in some cases if it's more of a rare, complex type of dementia. So it is one of those things where, so that's why the term dementia is used a lot, because they may not know. And the reality right now is that to actually 100% know, you need an autopsy. And so we're getting closer, to getting, more accurate diagnosis and everything like that. But, that's why the term dementia is used a lot.
With what does the autopsy show? Like, is it something that happens to the brain? I'm just curious what you see in an autopsy that you couldn't necessarily see yet in blood.
Well, that's the other tricky thing, right? Is there are 80 different types of dementias. And when you look at the core mechanisms behind it, mm-hmm. they can be quite different. Like frontal temporal dementia is quite different from Alzheimer's. And vascular dementia, too, is different. The mechanism is different from Alzheimer's. And then we add the extra complexity where you can have more than one type of dementia mixed in also.
Oh, my goodness.
So it is... And like I said, we are, learning more, getting closer to having faster diagnoses I know I've been working with the Alzheimer Society for over 4 years, and just in that time that there is so many more memory clinics that are across the province, including rural areas. So it is getting easier and easier to get that diagnosis than when I first started working with them 4 years ago.
What is a memory clinic?
So a memory clinic, in very basic terms, it is a group of professionals who get together and do cognitive testing. Like I said, it's a puzzle, right? So they have cognitive tests, that the person that they expect that might have dementia will be doing, interviewing that person to see, so what changes have they noticed? But at the same time, that is just one part of the puzzle. Then they also interview the caregiver because they need to know how is that person actually functioning day to day, and interviewing that caregiver to find out those things. And then, the professionals getting together, reviewing all that information, and based on all the different pieces of the puzzle that they gather together, what is the picture starting to look like?
And then that gets shared with their doctor kind of thing?
Yes. So in a memory clinic, to go to a memory clinic, you do have to be referred by the family physician because the results will be sent back to that family physician as well as recommendations. The person that's going through the memory clinic, if they're able to make a diagnosis that day, they will. And so they will be, told right then, what their diagnosis is. If there is some challenges in making a diagnosis, because one of the reasons why we always say, if you notice some changes, go see your family physician, because there is some reversible things that can present like dementia. And those need to be ruled out. Sometimes when people go to a memory clinic, certain blood work has not been done, and so they can't actually make a diagnosis until they rule out those reversible causes.
Like a UTI, for example.
Yes, and some deficiencies and stuff like that. And, so that's why it's so important. Like the very first step is to talk to your family physician and talk about the changes that are happening, because it might be that, your B12s are deficient, your thyroid is out of whack, and that would be, that's so much better, taking care of those than, worrying that you're developing dementia.
I'm Sam McKeag. Today we are talking about dementia and Alzheimer's here on Blue Sky. My guests this hour, Heather Dash, she's the program manager for the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan, and Sharon Garine, who spent some time navigating Alzheimer's with her mom. I heard once on one of the podcasts that I listened to, I'll tell you, it's called My Favorite Murder. And one of the main hosts went through Alzheimer's with her mom. And she once described it, once they got the diagnosis, as a shark in the water. You're in the water with something, you're very uncomfortable, and you don't know when that shark's going to attack. Sharon, would you say that describes what it's like going through something like that with your mom?
Yeah, very much so. And it was getting to the point where, for myself and my brothers and their spouses, the change in behavior. And that would just crop up every once in a while, and it took a while to go for that penny to drop, to go, oh no, this is, my mom would say, my mom was always a jokester, and she was always, pretty happy and pretty easygoing. And every once in a while she would say something that was so unbelievably inappropriate, which, would not be surprising knowing me, but but for her that was
so off.
It was so off that you were just taken aback, or she would do something that was so unbelievable.
Can you give us an example?
Well, yeah, actually, the one time, my mom was a bit of a pack rat, right? My mom and dad, the Great Depression had a big effect on them. They were farmers.
It's a generational thing.
Yeah. So one time I asked my mom about something that she had in the basement, like I can't even remember what it was, to be honest with you. I think she had like an old butter churn or something like that. And I wasn't asking because I wanted the thing. I was just, I had this curious question about it. And my husband and I went away for the weekend. And when we came home, she had moved dozens and dozens of items into our basement that were old, in her mind, antiques, valuables. And when I went, what is this stuff doing here? And she said, well, you told me you like antiques. And I went, no, I didn't. And I was furious with her. I was so like, what is all, because this to me was just all junk, right? My mom had this notion that everything old was valuable, and not always, kind of thing. Including like Eaton's catalogs that had half the pages missing, kind of thing, when Eaton's no longer existed, that sort of stuff. So anyway, but it was things like that you're just like, what is she doing? And then the penny drops about, there's been one too many of these.
What was the big moment for your family?
My mom had a knee replacement, and she was, it was after that we started to really notice.
Is it because of time spent with her?
But then, spending a bit more time with her, but then we convinced her. There was a series of things that happened. She was still driving for a long time, and where she would drive was a very small area. She would drive to the grocery store. We live in the South End. She lived in the South End. She would just drive to the grocery store and back and that sort of thing. But she had to back down a long driveway, and in a space of a year, she took off the side view mirror 3 times by hitting the house. So one time you're like, oh, okay. 2 times you're like, what's going on? 3 times it's like, there's a major problem here. And she started to do, my dad had died by that point. She was starting to do things, and you'd go in the house and it's like, what's that smell? Oh, I accidentally had the kettle on. I didn't realize the burner was on and it burnt. And you're like, oh, and then it happened again. And like she bought another kettle, and then that happened again. So then I went out and I bought her an electric kettle, and then she set it on the burner and turned the burner on. So that, moments like that are like, okay. And also, my mom was a person who met life head on.
You get that from her.
Never shied away from a challenge until it came to her own health. Because I think deep inside she knew what was going on. So getting her to go see a doctor,
she's scared.
Of course, because there's not a lot of great outcomes when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's. So yeah.
So how long was the process for your family?
I think probably 9 years. There was a year there of a lot of frustration of trying to talk to her about something's not right, that sort of thing, which she really fought against. And then going to see a doctor that was a horrible doctor who basically gave her this so-called cognitive test where what's your name, what's my name, what day of the week is it? And that was his version of a cognitive test. And then my brother went with her and turned to my brother and said, you guys just need to spend more time with your mother. She's lonely.
Because shame does a lot for a medical diagnosis.
Sure does. So anyway, then we got her to convinced her to go see a different doctor who actually did a realistic cognitive test. And she passed the first one with flying colors, but the one where you had to do the here's the 3 items. Remember the 3 items? We're going to ask you that later. But also draw the face of a clock and then show me what this time looks like. Show me what that time. She failed every single one. And that doctor, who was very kind, said, Madeline, you cannot live alone. And she's like, oh, okay.
Were you just stunned?
I was stunned, but so grateful because
Did she just need proof?
Yeah, I think so. I think she needed someone, she's of that age, and it's not that I don't have great respect for doctors and medical personnel, doctors, nurses, researchers, but if her doctor said, take this jelly bean every day for the rest of your life, my mom would have taken a jelly bean every day for the rest of, she would have never questioned anything.
Great respect for doctors, yeah.
Great respect. And once that made the process easier.
Once she was in care, what was the decline like?
So she didn't immediately go into care. We convinced her to go into I still grapple with this term. I don't know if it's independent living or assisted living. It was a senior's place.
Senior living with help.
Senior living with help, right? They cleaned her suite once a week. They washed her sheets and towels, and she got 3 meals a day. But in the process of moving her and all the stuff out of the bungalow that she was living in and spending 8 to 10 hours a day with her for about a week, we all realized she needs more help than this. But that decline went pretty sharply. She was on a drug for a while. I think it was called Aricept. Is that, yeah, okay, thank you. And that seemed to hold it at bay. But the problem with that is you can't, you think, oh, well, she's still forgetful and she's still doing things. She went through a real period where her circadian rhythms got messed up and she was swapping days for nights. She was missing meals all the time in the place she was living, and they would not come and get her for meals. They would not come and remind them. I know since then they've changed that policy, but so every time I'd see her, they had a little bistro there. She'd be drinking coffee and eating cookies, and that was what she was surviving on for a long time. So I would sometimes go at meal times, and she would be sleeping, but I'd get her up to go to eat because she wasn't eating properly. Mm-hmm. And that's not helping. But they'd tell me she's wandering around at night, she's doing things. And there were a couple of incidents where she one day decided she had to go to the bank, and she walked out of the building, and it was December, and it was a very cold day, and she had no shoes on, no coat, no hat. And she got about a half a block away before somebody turned her around and brought her back there. And I mean, she would have, I don't know how far she would have gone. Her bank was also about a 2-kilometer walk, but she was determined she had to go there. Then the nursing home staff were telling me that she was doing things like walking around naked and down the hallway and things like that. It was the middle of the night, and at that point she wasn't really worried about the shame or anything like that. But those signs meant, okay, we have to. And once she went off the Aricept, it was a really steep decline. Really
when you see what a difference that medication was making.
Yeah, and it was hard to tell. It was hard. Is it making a difference? I can't tell. You could tell as soon as she went off of it. So
I understand you took some classes through the Alzheimer Society as you were going through this.
Yes.
Tell me about those.
Early days. They were so amazing, so helpful. Like, some of them were very sciencey about this is what's happening in the brain. This is what this looks like. And that was great. That was great information. But there was so much good practical advice. Like, there was a woman. Sorry,
I'm getting emotional about the classes again.
There was a woman who had worked for years at William Booth, and she just stood out in terms of, she saw everything. And just advice like, if your parent or your loved one doesn't want to have a bath, it's because she goes, just my experience. They're frightened of water. They probably weren't ever people that were swimmers, and they may be having problems with their eyesight, and they can't tell how deep that water is. Oh. And things like that. And she encountered people who had a black welcome mat or something like in front of their room, and they didn't want to step on it because to them it looked like a hole.
Wow,
that they were walking
because their vision was no good.
And it's really hard when someone has dementia to get a proper diagnosis on their eyes because, my mom, we were so fortunate with my mom because my mom was pleasant throughout. There was the odd day where she wasn't pleasant, but my mom was happy and grateful you came to see her.
But not everyone is.
No, so I think a lot of people are not. But the other thing that this woman said that stuck with me was that she said a lot of times we people in care don't eat well. And she said, one day I actually stood back and I looked what was on the plate that we were serving them in William Booth. And she said it was a white plate and we were serving some kind of a poached fish or chicken. And there was mashed potatoes and there was creamed cauliflower. And
That's
she
very
said,
white.
It was white, and it was on a white plate, and it was on a white table. And she goes, I don't think they could see. So she said she went out, and she, just as an experiment, bought a bunch of red plates and then asked, can you make sure that you're not putting all white foods on that? Because, a lot of cases people need to eat soft foods. So things like creamed cauliflower are a staple, right? And she said the appetite went up for the people who were eating off of just because they could see a difference. And that alone, just those kind of things just made me think, put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself,
By sharing that, I bet you just changed something for someone listening who's going through this. Heather, as you're listening to these things, her experience is very common.
Yes, it was like listening to that. I was like, well, when you were talking about her backing up, that it was something that a lot of people don't realize is a sign of dementia, is that perception.
Lack of depth perception.
Depth perception, and even where they are in relationship to their environment can be affected. So, for her, that her mom is like that backing up is like she didn't actually quite know where the car was. And then, and seeing, the plate, not knowing, seeing the food on it and everything like that. And so that is something that a lot of people don't even think that is a sign of dementia.
Can we talk about care for a second? Because I know there are different levels of care in this province. I think it's level 1 through level 4. Where does someone with this kind of memory loss fall?
Well, one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about dementia, that, there are ranges, and also somebody isn't 100% cognitively fine and boom, one day they have dementia, that it is a spectrum, that it does change over time. So it really depends where they're at on their journey. As of right now, there's about 65% of people who are diagnosed with dementia that are living in the community that aren't even in long-term care. So at the beginning stages, they very much can be in the community, but as the disease progresses, the damage does not stop. It just keeps on happening and happening, and their ability to adapt really goes down, and that's when they need extra care. So usually somebody who does end up in long-term care, because they do need to be assessed before that they enter in the health region long-term care. And it's usually that disease have progressed quite a bit so that they do need 24/7 care at that time.
I want to talk to you about diagnoses, because the diagnoses at this point, is it for the patient or is it for the family?
It really is for both. For my experience is one, it's almost like, okay, now I know why, I'm having these difficulties. Now I can, sort of opens up okay, so now I know why this is happening and it's okay for me to ask for help. And that is the one thing that I usually try to stress, because dementia, there's damage being done to the brain, but we can't see it. It's an invisible damage being done. If somebody has their leg amputated, you don't think twice for them to get a prosthetic or use a wheelchair or anything like that. But a lot of people who have dementia, they feel that it's somehow wrong to be.
There's a level of shame.
Level of shame to ask for extra help, to have these tools to help navigate. But in the same thing is, if they do accept that help, then it's as with anybody. If you're under a lot of stress, if your brain doesn't work that well, so if you have a lot of frustration, a lot of stress, you're not going to be functioning very well if you have dementia. By adding extra resources, extra help, then that stress starts to lessen, and the person may actually find that they start functioning a bit better because of that reduction of stress.
Sharon's nodding along with that.
Yeah, I found that for just my scenario with my mom is that when she was 1 foot in reality and 1 foot in dementia, that was so much harder on her. And so, what I mean? It's not a 50-50 split. Some days she was great. The next day she was saying stuff that, you're like, I don't understand. But I learned very quickly, you don't
Never
argue.
admit.
You never argue. You just go along, because they're already under so much stress. unless it's like, I'm going to touch this power line or something like that, then you say no.
Safety, yeah.
Yeah,
Safety,
but if she's saying black is white, well, then today black is white and vice versa, or the sky is green. That's okay. Because, it dawns on you pretty quickly that you only have so much time left with this person, and you only have so much time left when they have the capacity to communicate, to talk to you, to know you. And why waste it arguing with them? You just that is pointless. That is pointless.
I want to bring in Becky Quist. She's the person in charge of fundraising for the Alzheimer Society, and they're in the middle of their biggest fundraiser of the year. The Walk for Alzheimer's happens next Saturday, May 24th. Hi, Becky.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Tell us about this walk and how it impacts your organization.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the IG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's takes place across Canada. It's Canada's biggest and only fundraiser for Alzheimer's and dementias. There's about 150 communities that participate. We have 5 in our province that will be hosting in-person walks. We have Regina, Saskatchewan, Prince Albert, Swift Current, and Moosomin. Again, it is our biggest fundraiser for dementia. It's an opportunity for people to get that tangible connection to the community that's affected by dementia and show their support in a very real way. We know that at the Alzheimer Society, community changes everything, and we really rely on that feeling at our walks. I don't know if everybody also wants to participate in different ways. We also have Walk Your Way. So if you can't make it to one of our in-person walks, we have the opportunity to register online as a team or individual anywhere across the province. And if you want to host your own event, you can participate by a walk in a box.
Can you tell me where the money goes for people when you're doing a fundraiser? What are you fundraising for?
So the fundraising that happens for any of our campaigns at the Alzheimer's Society, it goes to funding the things that Heather and Sharon were talking about and that Kelly, Jo, and Eric talked about. They're the programming and resources, the information, the people that you talk to when you call and you need that support, as well as research into a cause, preventions, and hopefully cures.
How many people do you expect to show up for this? Let's just say provincially.
That's a really great question. Probably close to 1,000 people across the province will participate at our in-person walks, give or take, depending on the weather.
What kind of stories are shared while you're there? I imagine that it's probably cathartic for people to go on this walk.
So depending on the location, you're going to hear from someone in your community that has had a direct relationship with the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan, as well as a journey with dementia and why the walk is impactful for them and their families. It's usually somebody in that community that's going to be speaking to it.
If people want to take part, how do they do that?
Yeah, if you want to register online, you can go to walkforalls.ca. You can register as a team or as an individual. We are fundraising very hard right now. We have a goal in the province of $260,000. We're currently at about $60,000. If you are looking to register or donate, I do want to mention 2 things very quickly. We have 2 generous matching gifts in 2 of our locations. In Regina, we have a matching gift of $10,000 from the Jean Marie and Anna Forbes Foundation at the South Sask Community Foundation. So we haven't quite hit that $10,000 match yet, but you can double your donation in Regina, or you can donate in Prince Albert. We have a matched gift of $25,000 from the Malcolm J. Jenkins Family Foundation in partnership with the Ripley family of Melfort. So if you aren't participating or you want to participate and still donate and double your gift, you can do that in Regina and Prince Albert. Again, you can go to walkforalls.ca or you can call our provincial office 306-949-4141. You can speak to either me, Becky Quist, or my colleague, Brooke Smith.
Becky, thanks for jumping on with us and telling us about this. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Becky Quist is in charge of fundraising for the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan. Have you gone and done the walk?
I have not. I donate every year, but I have not done the walk.
I imagine that it's one of those things where community is great, but in some cases it could be hard to want to go and rehash some of those things you've been through too.
Yeah, I don't even have a good reason for not doing the walk. To be honest with you,
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. It's
I'm
okay.
wondering,
but it's always been one of my donations. Yeah, that I do every year. So yeah.
I guess I want to ask you before we go, because we're kind of coming up on the end of the show here. And I feel like this is the kind of thing we could probably talk about for a really long time because it impacts so many people. I think everyone knows someone who has had dementia or whose family members had dementia, and you've seen the toll that it takes. Sharon, what's one thing that you really learned with your mom that you wish someone would have told you sooner? I think you've shared a lot of really good things, but what's one thing that if someone's listening today, what's the helpful thing?
Okay, I want to say two things.
Okay, give me two.
Okay, number one, I couldn't believe how quick my mom was so happy and had lots of friends, and I couldn't believe how every one of them seemed to disappear when she was diagnosed, and how isolating that is. And then they might go and visit once a year, and then I get like this angry phone call about how bad she's doing and that sort of thing. And it's
uncomfortable.
Like, sure it is.
Yeah.
It really is. But I'd really like to remind people that dementia is not contagious.
That's a great reminder.
Yeah, because even in the first place that she went, as soon as people found out that she had dementia, a lot of people just avoided her, and anyway,
because it makes them uncomfortable.
It makes them uncomfortable, and I get it, but it made her a lot more uncomfortable to be so completely isolated. And the other thing is, there's going to be three things. Never, ever, ever let a person with dementia, no matter what stage they're at, navigate that healthcare system alone. The healthcare system's tough for a person with a fully functioning mind. You cannot. They've got to have an advocate. They've got to have an advocate, or they're just going to, as Eric said, get stuck in the weeds and not get places. So. If you're out there and you have a family member with dementia, buckle up, because doctor's appointments, emergency room visits, those sorts of things are the most important thing you need to show up for. The other thing is, no matter what state my mom was in, visiting her made a huge difference. It always made a huge difference. It would brighten her day. And sometimes she only had the energy for a 20-minute visit, And I didn't go every day. I'd try and go for sure once a week, sometimes twice a week. But I couldn't get over the people who were in the same home as her, who had family members living in the city who never visited. Because I talked to the administrator about my level of guilt about, I only made it once this week. And she goes, oh, no. Don't beat yourself up. You're doing great. So... yeah.
I also hear when you say those things, the special people that work with your mom.
Oh,
How special the staff and people are, and what a special person it takes to work with people with dementia and Alzheimer's.
Unbelievably fantastic. She was in a personal care home, and I cannot speak enough for. Sorry, getting overwhelmed again.
I was trying not to make you sob. I really was.
Thank you. But yes, unbelievable. Just candidates for sainthood.
If someone listening has noticed these things, Heather, quickly before we go, what is the first phone call they should make? Who are you calling if you're noticing something wonky, whether it's a spouse, a family member, one of your parents? Who should you call first?
Well, I, too, will have two numbers.
Okay, we've got less than a minute.
Okay, so the first thing is always talk to the doctor, but also calling the Alzheimer Society, because we're there to help navigate even before the diagnosis. You do not need a diagnosis to contact us, and we could help you navigate the healthcare system, which can be very difficult.
Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you for coming in and sharing your mom's story with us.
You're welcome.
I hope that we've changed some people today, that they've considered things a little differently. And yes, dementia is not contagious. So wrap your arms around people. You will be better for it, and so will their families.